happening with Spicejet? It's a question on every domestic flyer's mind right now. The airline has found itself in the midst of turbulent times, both literally and metaphorically. It's been grabbing headlines almost every other week. 8 technical snags in just 18 days. So what's happening? What's wrong with the airline? First, let us tell you the various instances. On the 5th of July, a Spicejet freighter heading from Kolkata to China returned as the pilots realized after the takeoff that its weather radar was not working. On the same day, the airline's Delhi flight was diverted to Karachi due to malfunctioning fuel indicator, and its Kandla-Mumbai flight did a priority landing in Mumbai after cracks developed on its windshield mid-air. On the 2nd of July, a Spicejet flight heading to Jabalpur returned to Delhi after the crew members observed smoke in the cabin. In 2 other separate instances, the fuselage door warnings lit up while taking off on the 24th and 25th of June. Before that, on June 19th, an engine on the carrier's Delhi-bound aircraft caught fire as the engine malfunctioned. In another incident on June 19th again, a Spicejet flight for Jabalpur had to return to Delhi due to cabin pressurization. Now, before we get into what is wrong or how it can be resolved, let's understand why all of us are talking about Spicejet. Simply because it is one of India's budget carriers. And that's a big draw to the common man. Spicejet is the second most used airline in India after Indigo and has the 3rd largest fleet size in India after Air India and Indigo. In fact, over 10 lakh passengers use Spicejet every month. Lakhs of passengers' lives are risked with these technical glitches erupting on the flight mid-air. Now, the aviation regulator, DGCA, has put the carrier on notice. It has said that Spicejet has failed in establishing safe services, safety margins are degraded, and most of the incidents are related to either component failure or system-related failure. Spicejet, in its defense, said their aircraft are regularly audited by DGCA and flights are in compliance with regulations. But why are there such gaps in operations in the first place? Why is there safety oversight? Why is there inadequate maintenance? Why is Spicejet struggling? Is it the mounting financial troubles that's pushing the airline to the edge? Because let me highlight here that the carrier incurred an accumulated loss of 2,300 crore since March 2020. So what's happening with the airline once again, and why is it on the edge? To discuss this, I'm joined by Dr. Sanat Kaul, who is the former Civil Aviation Joint Secretary of the Government of India. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to Mirror Now. I'll come to you in a minute, but before that, let's listen in to Spicejet's response to the DGCA notice.
15 वर्ष से स्पाइसजेट बिल्कुल एक सेफ एयरलाइन चला रहा है और आगे भी चलाता जाएगा। जिस तरह की हादसों की बात हो रही है, वो छोटे छोटे हादसे हैं, वो रोज प्रतिदिन एयरलाइंस में होते हैं। औसतन 30 हादसे रोज प्रत्येक दिन एयरलाइंस के होते हैं। उसमें एक आध हादसा या 2 हादसे जो स्पाइसजेट के होते हैं, वो मीडिया में आजकल दर्शाए जा रहे हैं। ये कहीं किसी भी रूप में सही नहीं है। आप अगर आज के ही हादसे देख लें, आप अनेकों हादसे देखेंगे बाकी एयरलाइंस के, तो ये हादसे होते हैं। इसका ये मतलब नहीं कि कोई भी एयरलाइन अनसेफ है। ये जब हजारों फ्लाइट होती है तो छोटे छोटे हादसे होते रहेंगे। प्रत्येक एयरलाइन का ये कर्तव्य है, और हमारा भी है, स्पाइसजेट का, बाकी एयरलाइंस का भी है, कि सेफ से सेफ हम सर्विस अपनी चला सके। और जहां तक शो कॉज का सवाल है, जब आप मीडिया में बहुत हाईलाइट होते हैं हादसे, तो डीजीसीए का ये कर्तव्य है कि वो हमसे सवाल पूछें, और हमारा कर्तव्य है कि हम उन सवालों का जवाब दें, और साथ में मिलके। डीजीसीए और हम कोई 2 अलग अलग तरफ नहीं है, सब हम एक साथ हैं।
Well, छोटे छोटे हादसे होते रहते हैं. Dr. Kaul, let me bring you in on this. That's what Spicejet had to say. What, according to you, is causing these repeated malfunctions? Sometimes the radars are dysfunctional or the windshield cracks. There are fuselage door warnings in one instance. There was even smoke that gripped the cabin. While we do hear such instances from other airlines as well, Spicejet seems to be on top of the trouble table. Give us a sense of how serious these glitches are and the ramifications if not acted in a time-bound manner.
To start with, we just heard the chairman Spicejet give his version. It's somewhere the truth lies somewhere in between. And it will be very difficult for me to go into each detail because I'm not aware of what is happening in each instance. But what I can say in general is that airlines are stressed. 2 years of COVID has caused immense loss to airlines. Some airlines will have slightly better or deeper pockets, some don't. And therefore, there is tightening of the belt. Now, tightening of the belt takes place in many forms, but one form which also takes place is cutting down on safety systems, which are directly trying to, gloss over them. Now, to what extent that is there or not, I again don't want to say, but the responsibility for this is with DGCA. So I've got to make some very general remarks. DGCA is the safety regulator, and it is his responsibility to look into all these aspects regularly and on time. Now, the other issue is, do they have enough staff to do all the inspections on time? The fleet, Indian commercial fleet, is increasing day by day, and DGCA staff is not increasing. So there is a mismatch, which needs to be looked into. The second thing is that there was a concept of civil aviation authority and autonomous authority to be set up. It was decided, International Civil Aviation Organization had provided a consultant for this who prepared a report to set up an autonomous civil aviation authority, financially independent, and it had financial powers also. It had its own sources of funding. Now, that was abandoned. Why was this abandoned? I don't know. That would have been a much better setup by DGCA to organize these safety issues, at least, and many more. In fact, there is no advanced planning in DGCA, which should be there. Like in FAA, there is. FAA is now, in fact, looking into commercial space. They've been authorized by the US Congress to look into commercial space activities. And so they have grown, they have a lot more responsibility. Whereas here, DGCA is a small outfit doing some minor work, and they don't have the independence, and the selection of the people is also, there are a lot of question marks about it. So I think there is a need to look into the DGCA. There is a need to look into the inspection done by them of the airline, and there's a need to look into the financial side of each airline. If the financials of an airline are not good, they will obviously cut corners. Now, second point is that during the COVID, there's been extreme stress on airlines, and the government has done nothing at all to help them. Now, I don't mean that government should give a subsidy, but there's a lot of talk that the air turbine fuel, which the airlines buy, is extremely expensive, much more in the domestic sector than in the international sector, because the international sector is duty-free. But on top of that, there are so many taxes, tests, and fees which are put on the airline, which finally is paid by the passengers, that the whole operation of an airline is heavily stressed, and they pay the portion left with them for their margins, their profit, their maintenance, their other issues is limited. It is not an issue which is limited to civil aviation sector. This has to be seen at a government level, interministerial level, that do you want a good, safe airline, or you just want airline as a milking cow, heavily taxed because passengers want to travel, and you tax them and you take everything out of them. In fact, I would state that if you lower the taxes, more and more passengers will switch from railways to flying, and they will actually, the tax, even if reduced taxes, more tax will come into government kitty through the aviation sector rather than getting reduced, even if you reduce the various taxes and cesses of the airline. But this is not looked at like that. It is looked at as if, you reduce the tax, or there'll be some loss to the government or to the loss to the exchequer, and therefore, there is no reason to reduce any taxes and the burden on the airline. So the financial side of the airlines to be looked into in general, because safety is one aspect where safety and maintenance are one specific aspect where there can be squeezed by the airline management when things go wrong or things when the economics of the airline.
Right. So definitely, sir, safety and the financial and commercial aspect are interlinked. In fact, they are, dependent on each other. But I'd also like to ask you here, definitely there's cash crunch, there is pandemic, the ATF fuel, which is air turbine fuel price has risen. That inadvertently has led to the ticket price also go up. Of course, now the airline has not managed to perhaps rise its ticket price on par with, the amount at which the ATF prices are rising, and that's perhaps one of the main reasons for the cash crunch as well with the airlines. You also mentioned what the government can do, but as far as the airline is concerned, what can the airline do to perhaps overcome these financial troubles that's currently mounting on them?
Well, I don't think they can do very much because they're running an airline. If they reduce prices to bring in more passengers, they start losing money. If they increase the prices, then they also lose the market. And there is competition. There is a competition for seats. So therefore, the whole thing is, it doesn't gel.
Right.
That what can airlines do? Airlines have already cut down on so many things during the pandemic that I think the scope of their cutting down further is at the cost of safety margins and maintenance margins.
Mm-hmm.
That is how I look at it. That it is not at this time in general. I'm not talking about a particular airline, but all of them are stressed because of the pandemic, because there was no relief given to them, to this sector, and they have accumulated losses which they have to now recover out of the sudden sudden growth in traffic. Now they are financially stressed, and these are private airlines.
Right,
they
fair
have
enough.
To produce results, they have to show profit.
Right, fair enough. So requisite measures by the government could perhaps boost the the safety steps that are being implemented by the airline here, because of course if the government can do something as far as the prices are concerned of fuel, then maybe even Spicejet can divert that funds to say behind staff and behind maintenance. Being an aviation expert yourself, Dr. Kaul, I'd like to ask you, according to the DGCA notice, Spicejet is operating its fleet on MEL, which is the minimum equipment list. Now, for our viewers, what this essentially means is that the aircraft is considered safe to fly, but not all systems are necessarily operational. So, Mr. Kaul, for how long can an airline continue operating under such circumstances and limitations, according to you?
Well, this is a technical thing that, for each aircraft, there is a minimum equipment list. And then it may differ from one aircraft to the other. Maybe a new aircraft does not require that many items in the minimum equipment list. So this, I think, I don't take that as a very serious issue, because minimum equipment list is a requirement which airlines have to carry in their aircraft, in their specific aircraft as designated, and that changes over time through inspection. It's a technical thing. An answer for that is not that simple, because who decides the minimum equipment list? Is it between DGCA and the airline? I suppose there is a decision, and it's a very technical question. It is not easy to answer what is the minimum equipment list for each airline and what it should be for each aircraft. So, so this is a discretionary thing with DGCA, basically.
Okay, so it's up to the discretion of the DGCA. One last question, sir. As a traveler, myself, when I have to take flights, should I actually be worried looking and hearing at so many technical glitches, incidents in the recent past when it comes to Spicejet?
Well, not really. I mean, the airlines are also interested in...
All right, there seems to be a connection issue with Dr. Kaul there. We'll try and reconnect, but as of now, these are the points that Dr. Kaul is making, that on the one hand, definitely it is because the airline is cash strapped. Even the government needs to intervene to ensure that maybe requisite financial arrangements can be made that does not put or push Spicejet to the edge, because the same funds can be diverted to perhaps proper maintenance, to look into all the safety measures whether they are in place, because remember, according to the DGCA notice, if I could even pull out that graphics out for you, why are there such gaps in operation is because there's inadequate maintenance. According to the DGCA, vendors are not paid in time, and because they are not paid in time, there is shortage of spare parts as well. And again, the airline files on the minimum equipment list, as I was explaining to you earlier, where not all systems are operational. And definitely one of the main reasons behind this is finance. Dr. Kaul is back with me again. Dr. Kaul, go ahead. You're making your point.
Yeah, so I was saying a couple of things. One is I had mentioned that there was the concept of civil aviation authority and autonomous authority, which will be big because India is going to be the third biggest passenger airline market in the world. And, you know, we can't remain in our institutional framework where DGCA can't even increase the number of inspectors on its own. It requires, you know, last time when India was put down by the Federal Aviation Authority of US into the B category.
All right, Dr. Kaul, my apologies there. We seem to have that continued connectivity issue with you there, but we've definitely got the brief idea of the takeaways and the points that you've been making. What Dr. Kaul is trying to say is that as a passenger currently, you do not need to worry, because definitely DGCA as well as the airline are, of course, at the same time concerned about your safety. So according to the airline, once again, all the safety measures and protocols are being followed. The audits are being regularly done by the DGCA, and at the same time, even the DGCA needs to step up. They also need to increase their inspection officers to ensure that not only Spicejet,